In January 2026, the United States made a move that surprised many of its closest partners. President Donald Trump announced that tariffs on South Korean imports would rise to 25%. The decision immediately drew attention because South Korea is not a rival country. It is a long-standing ally of the United States, tied together by trade, security, and decades of cooperation. The announcement was framed as a response to slow progress in trade negotiations. President Trump said South Korea had not fulfilled expectations under earlier discussions. From his perspective, the trade relationship had become unbalanced. He argued that American companies were facing unfair conditions while South Korean exporters continued to benefit from open access to the U.S. market. Tariffs, in Trump's view, were a corrective tool. He believed that increasing costs on imports would force faster action and better terms. This approach had already been used against other countries, including China and several European partners. Now, South Korea was placed under the same pressure. The immediate concern was scale. A 25% tariff affects pricing, contracts, and long-term planning. It changes whether a product remains competitive or disappears from the market. For exporters, it can erase profit margins overnight. South Korea's economy is heavily export-driven. Manufactured goods account for a large share of national income. The United States is one of South Korea's largest buyers. Any disruption in this relationship has nationwide consequences. South Korean officials responded with caution. They stated that negotiations were still ongoing and that progress had been made. The announcement, they said, came without formal warning. Behind closed doors, emergency consultations began between government ministries and major industries. Financial markets reacted quickly. Shares of companies exposed to the U.S. market declined. Automobile manufacturers were hit first, followed by electronics and industrial firms. The national currency weakened as investors adjusted expectations. The reason was not fear alone, it was calculation. Investors understood that tariffs reduce demand, slow production, and affect employment. Even the possibility of implementation can delay investment decisions. In Washington, administration officials defended the move. They said the goal was not punishment but balance. They argued that American workers and manufacturers needed stronger protection. According to the White House, patience had already run out. Supporters of the policy agreed. They believed the U.S. had tolerated unequal trade relationships for too long. From their perspective, allies should not be exempt from pressure if terms were unfair. They saw tariffs as leverage, not hostility. Opposition voices raised different concerns. They warned that trust between allies could weaken. Trade disputes, they argued, rarely stay confined to economics. They spill into politics, diplomacy, and long-term cooperation. South Korea plays a critical role in U.S. security strategy in Asia. American troops are stationed there. Joint military planning depends on stable political relations. Economic conflict introduces uncertainty into this partnership. There was also concern about supply chains. Modern manufacturing depends on cross-border production. Components often cross national borders multiple times before final assembly. South Korean parts are widely used in American factories. Higher tariffs increase costs for U.S. manufacturers as well. Companies must either raise prices or absorb losses. Both outcomes affect competitiveness. In some cases, production may shift or slow down. American business groups expressed unease. They warned that higher input costs could hurt domestic industries. They also feared retaliation, which could target U.S. exports to South Korea. Such responses are common in trade disputes. South Korea has the ability to respond. It can impose its own tariffs. It can adjust regulatory standards. It can redirect trade to other partners. China closely observed the situation. Tensions between the U.S. and its allies create strategic openings. When trust weakens, alternatives become more attractive. This adds a broader geopolitical dimension to the issue. President Trump's strategy relied on uncertainty. By announcing tariffs without a fixed implementation date, pressure increased. Negotiators on the other side were forced to act quickly. Time became part of the leverage. Some analysts believed the move was intended to force concessions. They argued that visible progress could lead to reversal or delay. In this view, the tariff threat was temporary. Others believed the risk was real. They pointed to Trump's long-standing skepticism of global trade systems. He had consistently argued that tariffs strengthen bargaining power. From this perspective, escalation was possible. Public reaction in South Korea was mixed. Some citizens saw the move as unfair treatment from a trusted partner. Others focused on avoiding escalation and protecting economic stability. Political leaders had to balance domestic pressure with international reality. Diplomatic channels remained open. Both sides emphasized the importance of dialogue. Neither government signaled a desire for a complete breakdown. However, positions remained firm. Global markets followed developments closely. Trade tensions affect currency values, investment flows, and economic forecasts. At a time of uneven global recovery, additional risk was unwelcome. Uncertainty alone was enough to influence behavior. International organizations cautioned against protectionism. They highlighted the interconnected nature of modern economies. Disruption in one relationship can affect many others. Stability depends on cooperation. The White House maintained its stance. Officials repeated that the U.S. would not accept delayed commitments. They emphasized that trade must be fair and enforceable. Results, not promises, were the standard. As days passed, no final resolution was announced. Negotiations continued out of public view. Both governments measured their options carefully. Each step carried consequences. For South Korea, maintaining access to the U.S. market was essential. For the U.S., maintaining strategic influence in Asia mattered deeply. Neither side could ignore the costs of escalation. Neither wanted to appear weak. The situation highlighted a larger pattern. Economic tools are increasingly used as instruments of power. Trade policy has become a central feature of foreign relations. Decisions once handled quietly now shape global headlines. For businesses and workers, the outcome matters directly. Prices, jobs, and investment depend on policy choices. Uncertainty slows planning and raises risk. Stability supports growth. This moment represents more than a trade dispute. It reflects changing ideas about globalization and national interest. It shows how alliances are tested under pressure.
and it reveals how economic power is exercised in the modern world. The final outcome remains uncertain. Whether through compromise or conflict, the decision will shape future relations, not only between the United States and South Korea, but across the global trading system. What happens next will show whether pressure leads to cooperation or whether it pushes partners further apart.